Hey there, friend! Welcome back to the Closing Chapters podcast, where every mission has a story. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Closing Chapters. Today is extra special because I have a fantastic guest. I would love to introduce you to Stacey Salyer. She is an amazing real estate agent out in Washington State. Also, has successfully built and sold a property management company. So now she is on the insight part of the world to tell us what we need to know about property management, how to build a successful business, and we are going to dive in today about how this can apply to military life. If you know me, I preach to all of my buyers that if it's the right fit for them, building a portfolio while you're in the military is a beautiful source of income and stability for post military life. So we're going to hash this out from A to Z and see, could this be a good fit for you? So I would love to just take a moment and let you say what you would like to say about you, Stacey. Tell us a little bit about your history, your past, and what you want to bring to the table.
Thank you so much for having me on. I love talking about property management. I love talking about real estate. I love talking about investing. So super excited to be here. As you said, I'm Stacey Salyer. I'm in Washington State. I actually, fun fact, live closer to the Canadian border than I do Seattle. So usually when people hear Washington State, they think Seattle, but I'm actually closer to Canada. I have been in the business for over 20 years. Started in 2004 as a property manager. So I actually started on purpose in property management, which is very different than most people. They usually start as
Mhm.
a realtor sales agent and then get into it the other way. And then I have, opened businesses. I built my own from the ground up. I've purchased property management companies and I eventually sold mine as well. So lots of different things. I've worn tons of different hats and I can pretty much educate you on anything property management and real estate and investing.
That's so cool. Um, I'm going to kind of break form because you said something that reminded me of a previous conversation we had. Before we start this conversation, right, we just talked about how you were in real estate, like traditional sales and property management. We talked about how you made it through the 2007, 2008 craziness when the market crashed. So explain why you were successful during that period of time, because that's something that's really useful if somebody's going to try to get into this world to understand they might need to be able to wear both hats.
Right. So the cool thing about property management, as most of you probably know, is you have contracts, right? So a contract that has residual income every single month is a very valuable asset to your business. And so since I was actually recruited into property management in '04, and that's what I initially learned and became an expert in, by the time the real estate crash came, I was an expert in property management and I didn't ever have a downturn in my particular business. So I wasn't helping buyers and sellers. I actually did none of the what do you call those? The repos or the
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like
anything
the
like
short
that. So I
sales and
was,
all of that.
yeah, short sales. Yeah, I really don't have experience in any of that. However, I have an amazing amount of experience in helping people keep their homes during that time frame. I worked with different builder clients that were able to negotiate with their bank and keep some of their homes that they were building and they couldn't sell at the time. Because I know probably in your market, just like it was in ours, it was just almost overnight, it felt like all of a sudden everybody's, making 200, 300K. Everyone's driving the Escalades and money's flying. And then overnight, it was just sad
Came to a
and
halt.
depressing.
Gosh. Mm.
And so I was able to carry my career through. I was able to support my family. At that time, I had three, well, I still have three kids, but they were all very, very young. We're talking daycare and kindergarten age young. And I was the breadwinner for our family. So it was really important that I was able to maintain an income. And, when you have those contracts, that's a huge asset to yourself and to your business. So I was managing, gosh, I think at one point in time, 200 single family doors,
Wow.
and it was a little wild.
Yeah, that is wild. I love that. And one of the things that I love so much about that is that I try to preach what you just talked about to sellers that cannot get out from underneath of their houses, especially in the military world. And I have listened to other agents in this particular market right now treat it like it is 2007, 2008 again, where sellers are supposed to walk away and lose 20, 30, $50,000 in equity. And I cannot wrap my head around that because my default is to do exactly what you said, to talk to these sellers and say, hey, can we rent it and make you clear for a year or two until you're in an optimal position to be able to sell it if you don't want to continue holding it at that point? And the excuse that I got, and I'm going to call it an excuse because I think it is, was, well, what if they need to buy on the other side? Then they might just need to take the $20,000 loss. So they're supposed to take a $20,000 loss and then go buy something on the other side and spend another 20% down on another property? No, that makes no
No,
sense. Like, if I don't believe in paying rent just to pay rent, but if you're going to lose more money than a year's worth of rent would be, then rent
right,
for a year and regroup, you know?
right.
So I love your mindset with that.
Yeah, no, and I think in your market, especially because you're licensed in what, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee,
Tennessee, yeah, yeah,
those,
mhm,
right? So when
yeah,
you're counseling your clients in those markets, especially, those clients are in a prime market to actually keep those homes as an investment. So now
yeah,
I'll be honest, on the West Coast, like Washington, Oregon, California, I may or may not counsel that same advice. However, I mean, we also have different equity levels here.
hmm,
So, there's kind of like lots of different factors, but it's those three states are far more balanced and or I would say kind of a little bit more on the landlord side than they are the tenant side. Where I
for
am, we're
sure.
super tenant friendly. So if you are going to keep a home here in Washington State, I'm very direct with those particular clients. And I say, I hope that I don't even hope, like you have to have a minimum of 6 months reserves. If you don't,
Hmm.
like, don't do this. And you have to treat it like a business. Now, in your three states that where you're licensed, you probably could get away with like 2 to 3 months reserves and you would be fine. But again, they have that. And then again, counseling them and teaching them that like, hey, yes, you're keeping this as a rental, but now you're also starting a new small business. So congratulations, you're a small business owner. And let's talk about what that looks like.
Yes, I love that. That is a great segue to getting started about a really big truth bomb. So we're just going to rip off the Band-Aid. You've kind of said it. It's not always sunshine and glory to have rentals or to be a property manager. So what type of people or what things may people need to consider that they may not like in property management? What is the worst of the worst scenarios that they're going to experience if they're going to be considering being a property manager?
Okay. So, number one thing is you're you do manage a property, but really you're managing people. And so if you are doing third party property management, so like let's say you get licensed and you're a licensed property manager, you think of yourself as the middle child, you're always going to be in the middle. Now, your fiduciary, I'm pretty sure in every single state, is always the client, which is the homeowner. However, the tenant, the resident, is always your customer. So while you're fiduciary to the client, you have obligations for the customer and you're always on this like weird wheel of like, hey, let's make a deal. Hey, let's mitigate conflict. Something may happen and the client is mad about it, or maybe the client doesn't understand, like, they're still emotional about their home because they lived there, they raised their family there, and how dare they, you know, like ruin the yard. I don't know, whatever. I mean, anything and everything can happen to a home, but
Yes.
you kind of have to get the mindset of now you own a business and let me teach you how to make that profitable for yourself. And granted, you may not, and usually you're not going to because real estate is a long game. You're not going to yes, like make a ton of money like year over year, like massive cash flow usually.
Hmm.
But if you look at it strategically, like 3 to 6 to 10, plus years out, you're going to build massive equity. You're going to be able to use that equity to buy more rentals, or fund your kids' college or fund your retirement or whatever it may be. But as far as that, I mean, so really it's people management, processes for sure. You got to be like process minded and have vision. So you really got to
Yeah.
be a visionary as well, able to like look down the road. And then really just kind of take it serious. And take good care of your asset as well. So you don't want to just like never do any maintenance on it or anything like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I imagine that's really hard for people that if they're not managing their own property, maybe even more so if they're managing their own property, potentially from afar, especially, that maintaining the property becomes almost like an out of sight, out of mind, or your anticipation might be, well, whoever's living there is supposed to maintain the property. And that's not always the truth, right? Like that there's a lot of differences in what the responsibility is and what's laid out within a contract. But I know that every state can be a little bit different about this, but one of the things you talked about reserves, and I think one of the things that people dive into when they are looking at property management or managing their own property themselves is simply that they're not expecting any repairs. Like they think it'll just get covered by the rent. And that is not true. And there are some very specific time frames that certain things have to be addressed. Like heat during the winter in Washington State. Like you cannot let somebody stay in a 30-degree house. That's not okay. So those big fixes have to happen pretty darn quick. It's the little things that people can usually be patient on. So I feel like that's a really big reality shock too. It has been a little bit for us when we first were, managing properties. The first time that we had to put on a roof or something big like that, we were like, "Oh, okay, yeah, we're chunking money at this thing. I hope we get it back one day."
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. And so that's the other piece too. So if you own a rental or multiple rentals and you want to self-manage, I always counsel people on that too. So, just remember that you've now created a second job for yourself or maybe a third job, right? So let's say you work full time, you're Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5, then you even have kids on top of that. So that's like two full-time jobs. Then you add a rental, that's a third full-time job. So
Hmm.
I really don't recommend people self-managing. I mean, there's pros and cons out there, I guess, to kind of learn the business, but I don't really feel like that's the best use of your time and money. So I always look through things of a filter. If you were going to charge somebody $500 an hour to talk to you or, do consulting, are you doing $500 an hour worth work if you're managing your own
Hmm.
property? Probably not.
Right.
And it's probably better to work with an expert because those experts are going to have all those processes already dialed in. They're going to have an after hours on call maintenance emergency line. They're going to have great leases. They're going to vet all the tenants for you. And again, nothing's perfect. I mean,
Right.
things happen. However, unless you have the time and bandwidth to do that, I don't ever recommend self-managing. And quite frankly, if you live out of state and you're trying to self-manage, that's a disaster waiting to happen. And,
Yeah.
I'm a very direct person. So like anyone
No, I
listening,
agree
I
with you.
really don't
Yep.
recommend. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I people ask me all the time, whether they should self-manage or use a property manager, and I tell them straight up that I use a property manager for good reason. I don't want to vet somebody. I like the fact that somebody else that has no emotions attached to it is truly looking at the facts and the figures for me and making an educated decision and passing that along to me. And I don't want to deal with the emergencies. I just don't. I don't want to have to find somebody that can get out there. It stresses me out and I feel bad if somebody's waiting. So a lot of times I don't even know that anything is happening until after it's either handled or it's something that is not important and we can choose. We just had a garage door opener, like the motor, get hit by lightning on one of our properties. And the when the garage guy went out there to look at it, he said, "Yeah, I just replaced the motor down the street. Like I think that it was a string of houses that got hit." Makes total sense, right? Not an emergency. So she asked us first and we got it taken care of. No big deal. But I didn't call somebody to come look at it, and I'm not even paying the contractor. I mean, my property manager is doing that and just taking it out of our proceeds. I'm totally hands off, and I love that. I love that it just all happens how it's supposed to. So I'm very grateful. Um,
Exactly.
but I am in that position that you said. I have a job, I have children, I have no business taking on a third job, right? I just don't. So maybe in the future, if we have a different lifestyle and the kids are older and we're ready for a different project, then maybe we'll be ready to take them on. But at this point in time, we're not super far away from some of our properties, but some are 3 hours away, some are 9 hours away. So we're just not in the position that we would do that ourselves. But I would love to continue talking about the plan for the future. So there is such a big, scary unknown when we're planning for the future of military life. And I think that this could have a very natural progression. So, what I would love to know is like, if I was getting ready to get out of the military, let's say I'm 5 years or less, and I'm considering I have a little bit of a portfolio. I've got other friends that ask me questions about property management. So I know that I've got like people come to me as a source, so I'm trusted. I have that kind of knowledge, and maybe I could do this. Maybe I could become a property manager after I'm done with the military. What personality traits or skills do I need to have to be a successful property manager?
Okay, that's a really good question. So I am not retired military. However, my dad is a retired Marine and a retired cop. So I was raised,
Double
I
down.
guess, in that. And
Yes.
I'm yeah, and I'm the firstborn daughter and firstborn granddaughter. So I mean, I'm, all those memes out there, that is me, 100%. And I actually have, the funny thing is I have quite a few different friends across the United States that are retired military. I think I've got Army, Marines, Navy that were that did actually get out and then start their own
Nice.
property management company, just like that exact scenario that you described. So I would say, number one, you need some business knowledge. You don't have to have a business degree, but at least be interested in running a business. The other would be knowing what you're really good at and knowing what you're not really good at, and hiring people around you as ASAP, to do the things that you're not really good at so that you don't get kind of things messy from the beginning. And I say that from experience because I'm not really good at doing property management bookkeeping. And I actually spent more money having them come in and fix things than I just should have hired them in the beginning.
Hmm.
And then I would say, being organized, a people person, being able to, hold good conversations. When you first start your business, you're kind of wearing all the hats. So, you do, if you're trying to go out and get new business, you can't just be a super introvert and never talk to someone because then you're not going to get clients. But, being able to kind of just set up processes, being able to follow processes. And I think the great thing about property management, and I think this is probably why a lot of retired military do so well, or maybe even like myself, was raised in that household, is that nothing is really technically hard in property management. And it's the same thing every single month. Rent's due on the
Hmm.
first, late on the 5th. Late fees are charged on the 6th. That, you post the notice on the 6th. You post and mail the late notice. That, everything is like structured, timeline, due dates. And as long as you just like follow all those and kind of follow the orders, then you can be super successful.
Yeah.
And, as long as you're kind of just organized that way. And there's lots of different tips and tricks to stay organized that way. But I would say that's probably why a lot of military people are successful, because it's just same thing every single month, just new month.
Yeah,
So.
I love that. There's so many things when you're talking. I'm thinking about my husband and conversations that we've had along the years and like how things might apply. And one of the conversations that we had in the past was that a huge mistake a lot of property managers make is that we give too many chances, right? That we tend to be too nice to people, too kind, and we don't just say, this is the rule. You break the rule, there's a consequence. And I think that that's one of the things that would definitely be very easy for a military person to say, you know what? You didn't make tape and wait. There's a consequence. You have to come back in 30 days. And if you fail again, then you're going to have X amount of PT that you have to do. That's mandatory, or you're going to have to do extra duties. I mean, that is a common thing. They are having to always, I mean, and it's not their preference, it's not their decision. It's there's a standard and you have to meet that. And if you don't meet that, then you're going to be counseled. There's a standard. Your rent is due by the 5th. And if you don't pay it by the 5th, you get a late fee. So I can totally see how that matches well, where it's simply like, this is the rule and this is the consequence. And that could be appreciated for sure. And then I think about how gosh, we have so many contacts with the military world that we could be utilizing and creating our own systems. You just said to delegate, delegate, delegate. And my husband was in the civil engineering world in the Air Force for many years. So I'm just sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, who could we be around that has, maintenance capabilities, right? Or has worked in finance before in the military? Like, who are these people that we could bring into our wheelhouse that would think like us, work like us, and understand our world so that we could be a cohesive group? So that it was just like a huge light bulb where it's like, okay, yeah, I can be the property manager, but who else could I be helping? Right? Or
Right.
who else could I bring into my world to make this easier on me? That's going to understand the way that I'm thinking, the way that I'm speaking, right? Because, you know, I think that a lot of military people tend to be very direct, like you're saying, and a lot of people can get their feelings hurt or their toes stepped on because they don't understand that it's just matter of fact. Like it's not personal, it's just like, I told you to do X, Y, and Z, and I needed it yesterday, and you didn't do it. What's happening? What's going on? And it's simply like a, do you need help or where are we at with this, like asking for an update, but they're not going to say, hey friend, I'm just checking in to see like how are we doing with this, right? It's going to be very direct. So I can see how there could be a huge benefit to almost creating your team of people that are accustomed to your world. So that was just like when you were saying all that, it just like, yes, all the light bulbs coming on how we can manipulate our own worlds to create this whole other structure. And I believe in niching down. So I think that like that's even better because like I would imagine if I was getting out of the military and I was going to be a property manager, I would be serving other military families more than likely. That would be my easy go-to client is other military, people that have properties to manage. So it all makes sense to keep it very military oriented in that facet. Um, that's awesome. So, okay, we know we've got to have some skills, a little bit of knowledge. That's fantastic. So let's talk about the building, right? So we have a 20-year career, 20-year opportunity to
Yeah.
build a portfolio. What should that look like? Should we just be getting single family homes? Should we try to diversify and see if we're able to get a quad, a duplex? And spoiler alert, with the VA loan, you can get up to four doors. You can get up to a quad as long as you live in one of those properties. So you can get
Okay.
multi-units with a VA loan. So if that is their wheelhouse, they can get one to four doors depending on where they're at and what they're purchasing. What should they do? Should they be very consistent on one type of property or should they diversify? What's the best way to build a portfolio?
Really good question. I think it really just kind of depends on your goals, but I mean, I'm a fan of just buying as much real estate as you can. If you ask any of my family, they'll tell you that's what I believe in. And yeah, so I would say, and I didn't actually know that about the VA loan, so that's something new
It's
I
a cool
learned.
hack.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I know that about FHA, right? Because you could do the same thing with FHA, and it's like a really cool like house hacking thing. So yeah, I would say take advantage as much as you can to buy multifamily. I think it also really depends on like where you're moving to and the market. So
Hmm.
that's where if it was me, and I was starting out, I was a military person, I would start building a trusted network, maybe like with someone like you. And then I would say, hey, I'm getting moved, PCS to, Everett, Washington. Who do you know there that could help me that understands like military buying and life and renting in the future? Because if you're buying and then you're staying there, it's usually what, 2 to 3 years, generally speaking, before
Yeah.
you're
Yep.
moved.
Hmm.
Then you're going to want to live in whatever you're buying. Although if you're buying a multifamily, just one of those units, then you need to make sure that you've got your network kind of set up ahead of time so you're getting the right advice for that area. Because again, if you buy in California, for example, it's not friendly to landlords, so you might not want to buy multifamily because the landlord tenant laws are a little bit different for multifamily. Same in Washington state versus like single family. So,
Gotcha.
you're not going to know that as a buyer unless you talk to an expert in that area first. And I
Hmm.
know those of us that have been in property management for a long time, like I have no problem chatting with somebody, 15, 20 minutes and giving that quick advice. So, when they're working with the realtor, when they come over here, um, then they can, go out and find what they need to.
Yeah.
That's the other key too, is that they do work with realtors who understand their vision because the majority of realtors don't they don't do investing or they don't understand that world and they don't do property management. So they may say, oh, yeah, yeah, I can totally help you, but they don't really know how to help you. So it is really good to find a realtor actually who understands both sides, which is a little bit more of a unicorn.
Mhm.
But there are those of us out there that can help. So
Yeah, no,
yeah.
I agree. Okay, I have a fun bonus question. This goes to building the portfolio. A lot of times when we re-enlist or when we initially go into the military, sometimes there can be pretty good bonuses. So let's say I've received a 10, 15, $20,000 bonus and I decide I'm buying a property. Uh, I'm gonna buy a vacation property of some sort, an additional property, secondary property, right? You have this on the West Coast and the East Coast, so you know the experiences on both sides. Where am I buying a property that's going to be a vacation home or a short-term rental? Where should I focus at? Like, what's your opinion on that?
Ooh. Well, again, it kind of depends on your budget. So West Coast is extremely expensive. So that's really how my husband and I ended up buying our vacation or our future, hopefully our future, like what I call semi-nomad life that I hope to embark on in 2026. That's how we ended up on the East Coast because of the price difference. So we were able to pick up a condo in South Carolina, steps from the beach under 300,000, 2 bedroom, 2 bath, about 1,000 square feet. It had been recently remodeled on the inside. I mean, it's beautiful. Let's see. If I bought that on the West Coast, we're talking over 1 million.
Mm.
Easy.
Hmm.
That's that would be on the cheap side. And
Wow.
again, so again, it depends on your budget. Um, but again, I'd probably partner with somebody who's really an expert in doing like short-term rentals in that particular market. Or, maybe you're building relationships with people so you can refer them out. But they also need to have vision and look forward and ask the questions like, have there been proposed regulations in the state to shut down short-term rentals? Have there been proposed regulations in the county or the city that I'm searching in? Doesn't mean that they've passed, but if they're up there for proposal, they most likely will come to fruition one day. So that's something to also keep in mind too. And if you look
Hmm.
at the West Coast and like Hawaii, those have already kind of started to get a little bit shut down. I would say, you're super high, like we're in North Myrtle Beach. There is some proposed regulation, actually, interestingly enough, in North Myrtle Beach, not necessarily to shut them down because it's such a
Yeah.
market, but some additional regulation so they can make more money, that being the city. But so those are kind of things that, working again with an expert to really give you the good answers.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's really awesome advice. Yeah, the regulation piece is really big. We actually were looking at a condo here in North Carolina that we thought would be a good flex spot, and it's in a gated community, and they won't let you do anything under 30 days. So
Yep.
it has to be a minimum 30-day lease. So we were like, okay, well, that's, a little bit tough. Um, in our world, that has been our experience with our short term. We end up having it be more of a midterm than a short term. A lot of people stay for at least a month or more, but we're legitimately right outside of the military base, and we end up finding people that are waiting for housing or waiting for a house to be built or whatever the case may be. So, yeah, I mean, that's super important. But I hope that people will ask those questions and actually take that step. Because I will tell you the most common thing that happens is that people will buy a vehicle or fund a boat and an ATV versus setting themselves up for the future. Because that, like you said, I mean, in 5, 10 years, oh my goodness, the amount of equity you could have for retirement. Because one of the things that's so scary about retirement is how do I have cash to live to move forward? A lot of times you can't buy a house unless you have a job already locked in with a job offer, or you're going back to a property that you already own. And oh, by the way, if you build a portfolio, you have choices, right? It's like you can say, where do I want to go? Even if it's for the intermediary, let me have some space to figure it out. This is the place that we felt most comfortable, or we know will fit our current family as we are. So let's go back there for 6 months to a year, and then we can regroup. So I think there's so many options when you have multiple properties floating around in the space. So that is all like really cool key components. So if we have built our portfolio and we are getting out of the military, at what point does it make sense? Like how many doors typically, if we have, is like that magic number where it would make sense to self-manage versus paying a management company? So this is now I'm out of the military. I do not have a job other than my family. So I can either just stay retired and pay somebody to manage my properties, or I can take them on. If how many properties should I have if I'm going to take them on?
Oh, I think it really depends on what your goals are. I mean, like let's say you have five, but you think, oh, I actually want to expand to third party, and third party would be then now you're a property management company, you're licensed, you got all the licensing. That does take some steps though. So if somebody is thinking about that as they go into retirement military, they should probably think about that 3 to 4 years before they retire.
Okay.
Because you do have to be in charge to
Yeah.
have your own. And then if you are not a broker in charge in most states, then you have to find a broker in charge who will let you do property management under them. And that opens up a whole different can of worms. So you gotta kind of think ahead. But if you're yeah, if you want to take on a job and you're like, that's what I want to do for my job, and I make enough money to where it cash flows for me, and um I'm cool just doing that. And then you want to start expanding a third party. I mean, you could really just start with whatever you have. I mean, I guess it kind of just depends on the number for what you are making. I mean, if you're making enough to live comfortably on what you have to manage, and then you can do third party and start layering more in,
Mm-hmm.
you can be successful. I mean, when I had my property management company, I did very, very well, and I sold it for a very high amount because, again, it goes back to those are contracts. It's an asset, and it's the residual income. And I didn't charge just a management fee and a lease up fee. I charged, renewal fees. I had admin fees. I had different programs for my residents. So there were different ways that I made additional revenue within my business as well. And then I also
Yeah.
had real estate sales as well. So I was able to help buyers and sellers. We had a tenant purchasing program. So we would help tenants go buy a different house, not the home that they were renting, because that was in the investment pool. But, so there's really cool things that you can do to build a really awesome business in the long
I
run.
love that. Yeah, and there are so many opportunities when you are on, well, anytime when you're in the military, but especially on the way out. One of the things that my husband always preaches is, when you're 2 years out, 18 months out, what are you doing to set yourself up? So, like, what classes are you taking? What certifications are you taking? And the military will pay for a lot of that. So, I mean, there's a very realistic world. As a spouse, when I change states, I can get my new license taken care of, the cost of that taken care of and covered by the military. Yeah. So, in the military world, you can certainly be working on some of that and doing that as well. So, I hear, if there's an opportunity to take associate classes in business or maybe finance or accounting, that's a great opportunity to learn that side of it a little bit. If you have the opportunity to go ahead and get your real estate license, if that's the state that you plan on staying in, or you know what state you're going to go to, then get your license there and have it already sitting on go. So I think all of that is fantastic. I know so many realtors that are still active duty, and that's their way to transition out. So I can only imagine that that could work with property management just the same. So I think all of that is really, really thoughtful. I wouldn't have thought 3 to 4 years in advance. So that's really an important key factor. I mean, especially if you already know where you're going back to. There's some people we blow through the wind. We're like, we think we might go here, but let's just experience where we go and see what feels like home when we retire. There's other people that are like, I am going back here. This is where I will be when I retire. So those people that already know that up front, I mean, this is not a hard thing to implement 3 to 4 years out. There's no reason why you couldn't be starting some of the steps. So that's fantastic.
Right. Yeah. And that kind of goes with, again, if you want to open up third party, because,
Yeah.
I got my designated broker's license in 2010 or nine, whatever, one of those years. And so that enabled me to be able to open up my own firm. But there's ways around it. Like you can do a rent a broker, or contracted broker, broker in
Hmm.
charge, pretty much in every, so there's ways around it. It just makes it kind of some more additional steps that you'd have to take and,
Yeah.
money to come up with to pay people. And it's also kind of hard to find a contractor broker that will oversee property management firms because the rules and the regulations are just so much more compared to the real estate sales world.
Hmm.
So again, I'm a huge planner. I mean, I am like I things planned out. Of course, things can ebb and flow for
Yeah.
me as well. But again, if somebody's like loving the rental thing and they know for sure they want to do, third party management, I would, yeah, for sure be planning 3 to 4 years out and get that regular real estate license and then be able to be the designated broker in charge by the time they're out. So
Yeah. No, I think that's wise. And everybody decides whether they're going to keep a property or rent it, right? We just talked about how sometimes it's a temporary fix to rent out a property for a few years and then they're going to want to sell it. So there is a huge benefit to having your general real estate license, even if you're going to be predominantly a property manager, because those people already trust you and you already have a relationship with them. So if you're able to help them when they are ready to make a change or a transition, then fantastic. And oh, by the way, you could be referring them along the way while they are building their portfolio and getting referral fees as a real estate agent for wherever they're going for making those connections. So I mean, you have said multiple streams of income, are the way to be successful. And there are so many different little avenues that if we just think about that and have it set in place and not box ourselves into one little thing. I think if you are only going to be a property manager and you're going to be hired underneath of a broker, like you said, I really think that pigeonholes you in this position when you have such a huge scope and a huge um, community, honestly, So I think it's a huge benefit to have your full real estate license as well. I agree with you on that. Okay, so we have made the jump. We are going to be a property management company. We are going to help third-party families. Now, what systems and processes should I have in place, or what software should I start with? I am an Excel spreadsheet kind of person, but that doesn't allow people to pay rent online. That doesn't help me hold leases in a portal. So where should we start? Like, if there's a few things that we must have in place, what should we be expecting?
okay. So again, and I'll share a list if you're doing like third party management, let's say.
Yeah, yeah,
So one, you have to start with your PMS. It's kind of funny acronym, but your property management system. So that's kind of your like platform to kind of your business, basically. So
okay,
that when you pick the right one, then you're going to be able to do, have your tenants pay online. You're going to be able to pay your, clients. They're going to each the tenant and the client will have portals. Some of them allow also vendors to have their own kind of portal. Most of them, the better ones are also going to basically kind of allow you to do all the business pieces. I think there's some better ones out there than others, but um, then you can kind of start plugging other things in. But minimum, you have to have that. Like, do not ever do third party management on Google Sheets or Excel, or don't use Zillow to do your rental applications. Like there's some just things that, especially when you're doing third party, you need to, kind of up the ante and move forward. So your property management system for sure, like there's out there, there's Rentbind, they're newer on the market. And so they have the newest like platform. It's pretty good, pretty good. And they also have an open API, which is really important for people to look at, because that means they play really well with others,
okay,
meaning like other techs that you want to stack onto it, they're going
yeah,
to play well. Because in the property management world, if they don't play well, then you can stack things on top of each other, but then you may not be able to actually like have real-time data. And then you're just,
yeah.
so there's also Appfolio, Buildium. Those are kind of like the three major ones, and that's what I'd recommend. And then from there, I would really look at like, so if I was starting a property management company today, I would actually, before I start hiring people, I would take a look at, my platform. And then I would take a look at AI and what's out there that I could use within my business to save some time. There is some stuff out there like with voice AI that's really helpful. It's not perfect yet though. Then I would take a look at what is taking me the most time. I mean, I can tell you as a consultant, you're looking at leasing takes a lot of time.
Hmm.
I would utilize one of the leasing platforms, and there's some really good ones like Rent Engine, Let Hub, there's Tenant Turner. And what those do is it basically acts as kind of like your online assistant. So
Okay.
when your ads go out through your property management system, they also go out through that platform. People can actually book showings through those platforms,
Yep.
use the code boxes. They can actually go to a house
Hmm.
unassisted and actually view the home. there's steps in place for security for that. And then, they can apply through those, and you're basically saving a ton of time, right? Because
Yeah.
that's the number one thing. So when I started my company, I started with Buildium, and then I layered on Tenant Turner because I was getting flooded. Because if anybody does property management, what happens is you put ads out there, and in Zillow, you can just push a button as a consumer. I'm interested in this home. And they don't pay attention, like the
Right.
consumer, and I'm the consumer, but they don't pay attention that that's like the same company, or maybe it's like even the same, like, there's two homes in the same neighborhood. So they just literally, like, at night, right? They're probably in bed, like, I'm interested
Yep.
in this home.
Yep.
The next morning, you're, one woman show, and you've got 50 emails that you like reply to. And most of the time, you're not going to get replies, or people aren't going to book showings, and you're like on and off the phone. So, finding tools that help alleviate a lot of that like busy work that's unnecessary. So it kind of goes back
Yeah.
to my rule of, do tasks that you would get paid $500 an hour for versus $10 an
Right.
hour, and
Right.
find those. Yeah. And then
Yeah, I agree.
the next one I would layer on would be maintenance
Okay.
coordination for that. So there's some really cool ones out there like Property Meld and Bendaroo and Hire Super. And then they kind of all layer onto the property management system. So
Nice. Yeah, that's a really great like basic boundary there. Um, Yeah, so I know that my property manager here in North Carolina, they use Tenant Turner, and we love it if it's a property that's on Tenant Turner because it's like, okay, it frees up, agents, because a lot of times agents end up being the cover, at least on the East Coast. We end up going and showing the properties. And for us, it's not much bang for our buck. We are not one of those. I do not work in a state where we get like the first month's rent. We get like 10% of the first month's rent. So the idea of, like you just said, doing the money per hour, right? It does not pay me per hour to go show rentals that I'm going to make $100 on unless I just really want to be nice that day. So I love those systems in place, and it's very helpful to everybody. I agree 100%. So, and I really feel like sometimes people here, it takes money to build a business, and then they don't really understand that it takes money to build a business. So I feel like you are so right that like if you're doing this gradually a couple years out, then this isn't it's not a shock at all to start building these systems and putting them in place the right way the first time. And I can say just from my experience of I want systems. I have been in the business for almost 10 years. I don't have systems. And it's because I get busy and say, oh my gosh, I need a system for that. And then I try to build it, and then I can't maintain it, or I can't get it off the ground because I'm too busy trying to keep up with everyone. And it's just a cycle. I slow down, and then I don't need that system because I've got one, two clients, and I can handle that. I'm fine. I can be everything I need to be. And then I get five or six again, and it's like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I'm going to drop a ball. So, word to the wise, it really is well worth it to take the time to set up your system first and foremost, even if it feels like you are paying more than you should be or what you could comfortably afford for a system. It will help you, and I think it also would help you scale faster if I
oh,
were imagining correctly. Okay, cool. So
oh yeah.
I think that's really really nice. So it gives you the opportunity to say yes to something you would have to say no to if you have those systems in place and you're a well-oiled machine. So I really love that. And if they wanted some advice or guidance on how to start this, like I mean, you can YouTube and Google anything, I'm sure these days. But there are some additional steps to figuring out how to successfully start any business, but a property management business. There's layers, like you said, there's the real estate side of it, there's the business side of it, there's the people side of it, and you're managing money. So there's several things to set up initially. So how could they learn about this? Like if you do you have any advice or a guide or a way to connect to be able to help counsel through this process to help someone start from the ground up?
Yeah, so I offer a few different things like in my business, my consulting business. And not one, I can do one-to-one coaching or
Okay.
consulting for sure. And I can work, if you're literally from the ground up, that would be a little bit more intensive, like one-to-one, but I put together a specific package and we kind of do a discovery call and go from there. I also have a really cool community that's great for people to join. So I would recommend, like, for example, if somebody's looking, 6 months, 3 months out of, getting out in the military, they know they want to do third party um, uh, management, they kind of have their own rentals. Join my community. It's $97 a month. That is a really, really good deal for what you're going to get and have resources in there. You get resources emailed to you in the first 90 days. I kind of have a cool campaign for that. And then you're going to also be surrounded by other people. So if you put a question in the community, you know, you know, other people may have good advice too. So that's, kind of find your community. So for that, and then I do have some different like, free downloads. I have a bunch of different free webinars that I've been doing and they're on my YouTube channel. And, obviously people can get on my email list and I send out a weekly newsletter. But really the biggest thing is, surrounding yourself with other experts, be willing to ask questions, be willing to learn. Also join a professional organization. That changed
Mm,
my career. Several years ago, I joined NARPM. So it's a lot like NAR, but it's for the National Association of Residential Property Managers.
okay.
Um, and when I did do that, I jumped in, I joined the board out of my local chapter. I was actually a Washington State president for a term for that. And then I also did national ambassador. So, the more that you can get involved and surround yourself with experts, the better you'll be.
Yeah. No, I think that's fantastic. We have a little guest coming in behind me.
I love
Um,
that. Yep. Well, when I started my company, I was a solo mom of three. And so I
yes.
started from my living room. So
We all
I totally get that. Hi.
we all do what we have to do. I know. No thanks. Oh, wait. Well, this was awesome, awesome information. Also, just a shameless plug. Your community is amazing. I am not a property manager, and I find so much value in what you bring to your community. The speakers that you have brought on, just the willingness to share. You are an open book, and that's so hard to find sometimes. People don't want to be transparent. They don't want to just truly give value. And I so appreciate that in you. You are an amazing businesswoman and have so much to share to everyone in your community. So you are right. It is much, much, much more value than $97 a month is going to get you. So thank you for providing that, even to people like me that are just curious and interested in your world, but not really wanting to jump right now into your world. So thank you for teaching me along the way.
Yeah, my pleasure. I love it. I love to teach because I always learn something new. And it doesn't matter if I'm, speaking in person or if I'm doing a webinar. I mean, even tonight, I learned something new. I didn't know that you could use a VA loan for multifamily. I
Yeah.
feel bad that I didn't know that, but I do. So, and that's the cool thing that I always find is that, the more you surround yourself with experts all around, then the better off you'll be.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much. And all of your links will be tagged below. So take some time, connect with Stacey. You will not regret it. She is an absolute gem. So thank you for spending time with me tonight, Stacey.
For having me.